We were sort of an accidental lean startup at Meetup. What ended up happening with us is that very early on, we realized that we could start running experiments. We could do a lot better than we were doing in terms of getting results. I sort of joke that today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. And so, people are going to take the lean startup, which was a really revolutionary idea at the time, and profoundly changed how business was done in a way that was wildly important. And I can give a little bit of context around that. And right now you're sort of finding folks saying, well, it doesn't work in this instance, or it doesn't work in this instance, and it doesn't work in this instance. There's individual situations and circumstances where that makes sense and where they're probably right. The reality, though, is that there's sort of like the underlying principles. And what are the first principles behind it all? And the first principles behind all experimentation, and all experimentation as it relates to business and lean startup movement, is really a humility to understand that probably what you think is going to happen is probably not actually what's going to happen. That your grasp of the world, your grasp of the truth, is limited by your own experience. And I learned this from my experiences running hundreds of, creating a usability program that ran hundreds of split tests of usability sessions a year, which is that basically how people perceive that others use technology is almost always driven by how they perceive it. And if you watch somebody else use technology, you realize how flawed your point of view is. If you've ever tried to direct your parents in using an iPhone or using an Android, or if you're trying to help somebody navigate around and you just watch somebody use things, it is mind-boggling to you how different they use it. And the same is true across not just an individual user case, but across broad swaths of users. And so when people critique running experiments, or they critique the lean startup movement against other ideas, it's really sort of around saying, do you believe that there is an underlying truth around user behavior, and that there's sort of a way that if it was done in a certain way, it would more likely than not unlock a big idea? And the answer to that is the only way you're going to really find out is either by watching every single person do it, or by using scientific method through experimentation to be able to suss that out. Now, there are if you don't commit to running something as an experiment, you're never going to really truly learn. You're just guessing. Right. And I know from experience that 80% of experiments that people run, according to Optimizely on their platform, do not move the needle. And if you just sort of use that as 80% of the things that people are experimenting with, and just say, well, maybe that applies to 80% of the things that people aren't experimenting with, that people are just trying, it means that you're right once for every 5 times you try. You're wrong 4 times for every 1 time you're right. And that's a profoundly terrible hit rate. And so the ultimate game, and what lean startup, or whatever you want to describe, what experimentation is about, what our job is as an industry, is to try and change that ratio, to try and invent new things, try and make new things happen in a way that actually people will actually use. And it's far easier than it's ever been to launch stuff. It's harder than ever to launch stuff that people use. And that's the entire game. And so we can sort of unpack each of the individual things around saying, well, does it lead to not having a larger strategy? Well, when you have a larger strategy and you need to make big bets, you still want to run experiments. You could say, well, Uber, as an example. Uber placed billion-dollar bets at a certain point in its lifetime around going global. Why could they make that kind of bet with such vigor? Besides the fact that they had a humongous, they had a lot of people willing to pour a lot of money into them. But why would you be able to do that with such confidence? And the answer is because in a small market, in an initial market, which was San Francisco, it was taking off. The usage was there. The data was there to say, if the rest of the world looks like the behaviors in San Francisco, it will scale to the world. And so is that an experiment? Yes. San Francisco was an early experiment that gave them confidence in terms of that it's a good idea to make the bet, and then to inform how to make the bet as they scale to the rest of the world. And so that's a perfect example of making pretty profoundly large changes that are not necessarily incremental, but that are global in nature, based on thinking about how you define an experiment, or where are you seeking truth from, and being really, really smart about where you seek truth to tip the odds of being right in your favor.